I reject the idea that it's a cult. I reject the idea that...
You reject the idea that the GOP is a cult?
Yes. I reject the idea. I think it's all about the two-party game, and it's all zero-sum, and they want to win, and that is the only goal in two-party politics is to win.
Then they wouldn't nominate Donald Trump.
Mehdi Hasan joined Chris Cuomo's show as a guest to discuss a familiar topic, Donald Trump and his alleged authoritarian tendencies. The conversation was filmed before the 2024 election, during the time when Joe Biden was still president. I hadn't come across this debate earlier, so I thought it would be interesting to share it here. Both Mehdi Hasan and Chris Cuomo made several predictions and observations about Trump's leadership style and the idea of authoritarianism within his administration. I found it really intriguing to look back at this discussion and see which of their forecasts turned out to be right and which ones didn't. Let's explore it together.
One of the sticks I've been beaten with recently is that I underestimate dangerously the dangerousness of Donald Trump. My suggestion is pretty simple. I'm not going to argue that he doesn't say what he says. I'm going to argue that it doesn't mean what it would if you said it. Because this man is a lie machine and a hyperbole machine. And you have to look at it that way, that the idea that he's a man of great vision and strategy who wants to become an autocrat and is going to put people around him who can help him overthrow America's democracy, I think is a laughably absurd notion. And the more the left insists on it, the more it makes people think who are in the center, right, that small group, that you guys are exaggerating the problem because you don't have better ideas.
So a couple of things. I'll engage in the substance of what you said in a moment, but let me just question your premise that this is a left critique. I know, Chris, I get it where you're coming from. You have this kind of stick, like you're in the center, there's a right and there's a left and you're above the fray. That, first of all, that's not true. But where does this left come from? Some of the most eloquent, passionate, and most informed critics of Donald Trump's fascism and assault on democracy are not leftists.
It's true.
Judge Michael Luttig is not a leftist. Liz Cheney, last time I checked, is not a leftist.
True.
George Conway is not a leftist.
True.
All of the former Trump administration officials who've said the man's crazy, he's authoritarian.
General John Kelly.
Leftists, right? So they're not leftists. I don't accept the premise that this is a leftist critique, not at all. In fact, there are people on the left who attack people like me and say you're being hyperbolic and agree with the premise of your statement. So it's not a left thing. Let's just put that to one side. In terms of the substance, number one, let me snarkily say this. Chris, did you think Donald Trump would incite an insurrection and refuse to leave office in 2019, in 2020?
No, but I also wouldn't characterize the behavior the way you did.
You don't think he incited an insurrection?
No, I don't think it was an insurrection. I think it was a riot.
Okay, did you? Okay, I don't agree with that for a second, but let's park that for a moment. Did you in 2019 or 2020 say Donald Trump will refuse to leave office and incite a riot and an attack on the Capitol?
No.
I did. In 2019, I wrote a piece for The Intercept saying Donald Trump is very clear about the fact that he won't accept the election result and he won't leave, and people are ignoring this danger. And if this, you know what's going to happen? Violence and rioting. I wrote this in The Intercept in, I think, May of 2019, about 18 months before the election. People said to me, you don't know what you're talking about. You're a Brit. You don't understand American politics. The Secret Service will walk him out. There's no danger here. This is all hyperbole. So my first point, Chris, is forgive me when I hear people say it's hyperbole. I was right then, and they were wrong. So maybe we should have a little bit of humility from the folks who say, calm down. A lot of the calm down folks were completely wrong on January the 6th, 2021. That's my first point. And then in terms of the substance, I mean, he is saying this stuff. I agree with you, Chris. He's a liar. He's an exaggerator. I completely agree. He's not a strategist. I don't think you need to be a strategist to be an autocrat, right? I don't think you need that. I think you have autocratic tendencies and instincts, and then it's an issue of whether those around you and the institutions...
They usually have a plan, Mehdi, as we both know.
Well, he's got people around him. Have you read the Heritage Foundation 2025 report? It's a pretty clear plan for authoritarianism. Pretty well laid out over multiple pages. But just go back to Trump. Okay, when I say... So a friend of mine said recently, a friend of mine who doesn't want to vote for Biden because of Gaza. So I can't vote for Biden. I said, well, what happens when Trump's president? And they said, well, we'll protest Trump just like we protested him the first time.
But how do you vote for Trump if you don't like Biden's position on Gaza?
No, they didn't say they would vote for Trump. They said, well, we'll vote for Biden, but they don't care if Trump wins. They're so mad at Biden.
I got you.
They don't care if Trump wins. And I said, well, what are you going to do once Trump's president? You're Muslim, you're going to suffer. We'll protest. We protested the first time. I said, what happens when he puts the military on the streets and they open fire on protesters? Oh, Mehdi, you're being exaggerating. That's too far. Mark Esper, Chris, a man you know better than I do, just went on MSNBC last week and said, he told me to shoot protesters. I said, we can't do it. Mark Esper won't be there next time. Next time it'll be Kash Patel or General Michael Flynn who'll say, sure, boss, whatever you want. So when you tell me like it's hyperbole exaggeration, it's not. He's already said it. He already gave the order to shoot people. We just got lucky first time around that there were a few half-spined conservatives in his administration who said, no, they won't be there next time, Chris. It'll be Michael Davis. It'll be Michael Flynn. It'll be Kash Patel. It'll be Sebastian Gorka, who will love it.
So you really believe if Donald Trump wins again, there's all kinds of mayhem, and he is doing everything he can, not just to settle scores, but to turn himself as closely as he can into Putin?
This discussion between Mehdi Hasan and Chris Cuomo took place in May 2024. During their exchange, Chris Cuomo treated Mehdi as though he was exaggerating or overreacting. But looking back now, Mehdi's warnings proved to be remarkably accurate. He predicted things like Kash Patel's rise and even hinted at how far government actions might go. While we don't see soldiers constantly patrolling the streets or firing on citizens, there have been numerous incidents where ICE agents have harmed people and carried out terrible actions. Mehdi Hasan's analysis turned out to be right on target, while Chris Cuomo clearly underestimated the situation. When the topic of the Heritage Foundation came up, Chris questioned whether Trump would really fill his circle with autocrats, and that's exactly where his judgment was off. It's now reported that Trump's administration has already completed about 16% of the Heritage Foundation's policy goals. Not many people would have expected the military to be used in American cities described as dangerous, or the establishment of ICE facilities that resemble prisons. If Mehdi Hasan could revisit that interview today, he'd likely admit that things have gone even further than he anticipated. Whether Chris Cuomo would acknowledge that is uncertain, but the rest of the nation can see it clearly. This is what an authoritarian government looks like. And now, with Trump recently suggesting the creation of a Trump arc in Washington, D.C., it's hard to deny how symbolic that move is of growing authoritarianism.
I believe that every bit of evidence we have, public and private, suggests that is his plan.
Because the institutions are too strong. And the rest because the institutions are too strong, and because the
institutions
the
are a joke
branches
in
of
this
government
country.
are too strong.
Which institutions? Is this the Supreme Court that's now running down the clock on his behalf so that he never faces a single federal trial before the next election, which in any other country would be laughed at? Chris, let me just bring you the immigrant perspective here. The rest of the world thinks we are a joke when it comes to our institutions. In Brazil, Bolsonaro didn't incite an insurrection. He simply questioned the results. The Brazilian judges banned him from running for president again until 2030. We have judges in this country who, by the way, are appointed by the president. Absurd system. No other country does it this way. They have independent judges, not party-nominated judges. Our judges, 3 of whom were appointed by Trump, are now running down the clock on his behalf. This ludicrous decision to hear his immunity case at their own slow pace. So no, I don't believe the institution is strong enough. I believe we dodged it in January of 2021. By the skin of our teeth, by people like Raffensperger happening to be in the right place at the right time, by the Supreme Court in that moment realizing that none of the 60 cases, including the Pennsylvania case, were worth hearing. Next time around, it's a different ballgame. You've seen the Republican Party, what they've been up to in recent years. They've purged any of those folks from 2020. Raffensperger, thankfully, did just get reelected in Georgia. They weren't able to get rid of him. But in other places in Michigan, they've carried out purges. And this time round, they're much better to take on our institutions. Which institution? The House? Chris, the Republican Party in Congress is a Trump party. You know this.
Mm-hmm. It has been to date. There are different ways to look at it. It's certainly as a matter of degree. How so? Well, when you listen to General Kelly, now, do I wish he had been saying these things while he was chief of staff? Absolutely. But even with a pretty weak, Esper, I would put at the stronger scale of this, although he made the decision to work for Trump. He had that good explanation of, I knew this guy was going to have to need good people around him. Because, all right, I'll give it to him. But that could break either way. Out of conscience, you could also say, no, I won't work with this guy, and let me tell you why. But that with a pretty weak lineup around him, there was a lot of pushback. And the theory from even John Kelly is the stronger people are around him, if you had regular people who were around other White Houses that he had interfaced with, they would have been a much bigger check. So even with these weak people were telling him no all the time, and he listened to them, because as long as it's good for him somehow at the end of the day, he goes along with it. He doesn't have what most people who want you to shoot at protesters have in their heads about why. And that for him, it's really that he wants to win. He wants to stall these lawsuits. And
Agreed.
It's basically the end of it.
Here's where we agree, is that the one saving grace we have with Trump as the autocrat in waiting is that he doesn't have an underlying ideology of any kind. He's not Orban, Putin, Erdogan, MBS, Modi in that shape or form. He wants to be liked. Right? He wants to save his ass right now, right? In terms of the legal situation.
And be liked. He wants to be liked, Mehdi. If you were to go on TV tonight and say,
he's not running a campaign that implies he wants to be liked at all. He's running a base campaign. He wants to be liked by his base. He's given up on any kind of. In 2016, he was reaching out to independents, trying to pretend to be anti-establishment candidate workers. Not now. But he's not even trying. But
Mehdi, he has a pathology involved in his behavior. Yes. I can use that word with you that most politicians don't. He is an actual amoral agent. As somebody who has studied philosophy for 35 years of my life.
He's also a malignant narcissist. And you mentioned pathology, Chris. Here's another, sorry to do another kind of I told you so moment. Back in 2018-19, Dr. Bandy Lee of Yale put out a book called The Dangerous Case of Donald Trump. A bunch of psychiatrists analyzed it from different angles. I pushed that book heavily. I had her on my podcast at The Intercept. I went and spoke at a conference she organized. People said to me, this is crazy. This is a left gone over the cliff, like trying to psychoanalyze the president. This violates all sorts of medical rules. Guess what? John Kelly, who you just mentioned, he bought the book. The guy in the White House who was chief of staff was using the book as a guide to his boss.
I do think it's weird for clinicians to want to analyze somebody that they haven't met.
It is weird, but it's a unique, we live in a case of lots of unprecedented moments thanks to Trump.
And he's a pretty obvious narcissist.
On the yes man and the no man.
Yes.
I'm not denying that there were people who said no around it. They didn't say no enough, like you just pointed out. They didn't resign and say their piece at the time. And by the way, even with those adults in the room, he still almost started a nuclear war with North Korea. He still almost started a war with Iran. He still kidnapped children at the border. He still praised neo-Nazis in Charlottesville. He still allowed 500,000 Americans to die, who probably many of them didn't need to die from COVID. So even with that, he was a disastrous, perhaps the most disastrous president of our in modern American history. I'm saying next time around, Chris, there aren't going to be those people. He is coming back with vengeance. 4 years is a long time. He's not the same Trump as term one. He is going to come back much angrier, much more organized, and surrounded by way more yes men and open fascists like the Bannons of this world than he did last time around. I'll give you an example, Chris, just one example. Mike Davis, who Don Jr. is touting as future AG or future senior figure in the administration, conservative lawyer, used to be a Bush guy, gone full MAGA. This guy is on Twitter saying, I'm going to deport Mehdi Hasan to Guantanamo Bay, right? Now, he doesn't have the power to do that even as Attorney General. But those are the kind of people that he and his people want to bring into the administration. It is not Jeff Sessions. As bad as Jeff Sessions was, he was still a conventional conservative.
I understand. I understand the concern. I don't believe it. And now you could say, well, you're being delusional. I don't think so. I just think that I'm being swayed by my very long time knowledge of him.
So what do you think is going to happen, Chris? I've laid out my vision. What do you think is going to happen from 24?
Well, first of all, I'm not sure
onwards, he's president.
I'm not sure that he wins.
No, let's assume he wins. What does he do?
So if he wins, one, does the left create any dynamic like the one we had after the last election? I don't know. Not that it would be baseless, but is Donald Trump, are the people around him capable of rigging? 100%. They're capable of it. So what if we get real proof that he rigged the election and that's why he won? I think he's much more likely to rig an election than it is likely that it would be rigged against him. So
Agreed.
I got to see what happens with that. Then if he wins, I believe that is so much of what the satisfaction was for him that he may coast from silly media fight to media fight, and he will do a lot of saber rattling against us. I think that will be his main focus, because the Democrats will all fall in line like every out party does.
Unfortunately. What do you think? So 2 questions. What do you think happens to all these freaks around him, the heritage folks, the ideologues, the Bannon? Do you think they just
he has
you don't think they have you don't think they have real clear plans on the social liberal culture wars front?
He is not a heritage front? He's not a Heritage Foundation guy.
But they're the ones who are going to be. They're the ones pushing.
They are pushing
whatever kind of agenda
things.
You want to call.
They were very effective with the
civil
judges.
Servants.
Yes, deep state stuff, as they call it, which I don't believe in. By the way, bureaucracies definitely have their entrenched issues, but I don't believe in what is called deep state. I believe it's a false negative.
But it's projection, right, Chris? They want it to be a deep state that they can then weaponize. The stuff they say about Biden runs the FBI, Biden has nothing to do with the FBI. That's what Trump wants. We know that. You and I both know he would love to have an FBI.
Right. I think that's a little bit too clever for them. I think that's.
I'm going to stop here since this segment has gotten pretty long. The full discussion runs for over an hour. If you want to watch the rest, it's available on the Chris Cuomo Project channel from May 2024. Once again, it's clear that Chris Cuomo got a lot wrong, while Mehdi Hasan was accurate about nearly everything he said. For one, Cuomo didn't believe Trump would win, and he also dismissed the idea that Trump was aligned with the Heritage Foundation. But as Mehdi pointed out, that organization appears to be heavily influencing Trump's agenda, and that's exactly what has happened. Cuomo also assumed Trump would take a back seat and coast through his term, which we now know couldn't be further from the truth. Trump has been extremely active, constantly clashing with the media, ranting about Jimmy Kimmel and Saturday Night Live, while simultaneously pushing major actions involving the military, ICE crackdowns, and even triggering government shutdowns with mass firings. Another key disagreement was about America's institutions. Cuomo expressed faith that they would protect democracy, while Mehdi Hasan argued that those institutions were weak, and time has proven Mehdi right again. Our institutions, from the media to corporations, have largely folded under pressure. The lower courts have occasionally acted as a check, but with an administration that openly disregards laws and judicial rulings, that protection only goes so far. The mainstream media has mostly gone soft on Trump, the corporate world has stayed silent, and the Democrats, largely powerless at this point, have struggled to mount any real resistance, often choosing to stay out of the spotlight rather than confront him directly. So yes, Chris Cuomo was deeply mistaken about the strength of our institutions. I found it fascinating to revisit this older debate since I hadn't seen it before, and I imagine many of you hadn't either. It's wild to see how many of these predictions turned out to be wrong, and even more shocking to realize how much has unraveled in just 8 months. The pace at which the Trump administration and the MAGA movement have reshaped the country is genuinely alarming. What do you think? Were Mehdi Hasan's or Chris Cuomo's predictions closer to reality? Share your thoughts in the comments, and I'll see you next time.